district. So I've been traveling around the 14 counties that make up the 4th District. And yesterday I was in the northern part in Traverse City. Actually met with some job providers, small business, looking to expand their business by almost 100 employees. I was just recently delivered some medals to a veteran of the Korean War, and that's one of the things I try to do personally, to honor our heroes, those who served publicly, and deliver their medals that they've earned personally. So I've done some of that as well. Tomorrow I'll be visiting with, again, touring a healthcare employer. Then I'll be speaking to a Rotary. So, trying to have a variety of events and activities where I get a chance to hear from folks.
Okay, yeah, I do remember you coming into Big Rapids last summer and presenting a Purple Heart, I believe, to someone over at the Veterans Hall. So that's got to be pretty rewarding to do that sort of stuff.
Well, it is. We have so many heroes in this district that really have kept this country free and have served our country, and it's just an honor for me to be able to meet them each and their families. They each have their own story to tell, and actually the man I just met, Jim Boyd, is writing articles in the Big Rapids Pioneer, and he gave me the collection of those articles. And if you've never been on a submarine, I recommend reading his articles, and you'll really have an appreciation for the complexity and the dedication that people like him really gave on behalf of our country.
Okay. All right. I guess you touched on job creation and the company that you met with in Traverse City yesterday. Yet unemployment still remains pretty high, and the economic stimulus that the president passed, doesn't seem like it's helped. I was just wondering if you can kind of give me your thoughts on that, and maybe where you see the job creation coming from, especially in the state of Michigan. Unemployment is still high here, and we tend to be losing jobs instead of creating jobs.
Well, it's far too high here, almost 11%. It's been in double digits since 2008. We've had actually a longer and deeper run than the country, just over 9% unemployment nationally. I think what we need to do in Washington in terms of our legislative priorities should all be about jobs, and how do we get small businesses, family farms, large employers, how do we get them to hire people and grow jobs? One of the things people are looking at is the uncertain regulatory burden, whether it's on the financial side or a healthcare side. The tax policy is uncertain and complex, so I think we need to really lessen the regulatory burden, look at fundamental tax reform, and obviously we need to reduce spending, because our deficit is it's like throwing a wet blanket, our debt and deficit, over our economic growth, making it harder for the economy to grow and costing us about 1 million jobs.
Okay, that leads into another question. You were selected to serve on the Joint Select Committee on Deficit Reduction, and the committee is being tasked with cutting, $1.7 trillion in spending. Can you tell me where you guys are on that?
It's between 1.2 and 1.5, and this committee is even numbers of Republicans and Democrats, half from the House, half from the Senate. And we have not begun meeting yet, but there have been a lot of phone calls and lots of back and forth. And obviously I'm doing a lot of work to get ready for those meetings when they come, because we'll have to report by November 23rd, so we're not going to have a lot of time. But it's how do we reduce the debt by that amount over a 10-year period? That's how we look at budgets and spending in Washington is under the Budget Control Act of 1974, is that in a 10-year window. So how do we do that and come to some sort of agreement? And I'm hopeful we can, because we do need to reduce our debt. We do need to reduce spending. But as I said in these other points, we also need to try to grow our economy. I think that fundamental tax reform is important too, and we need to find new markets to export our products to.
Okay. Looking on your website and some of the bills that you've sponsored, you sponsored legislation, I believe it was in 2009, to require amounts remaining in members' representational allowances at the end of a fiscal year to be used for deficit reduction. Do you think that'll help?
Yes.
Where does that legislation stand right now?
It's been incorporated into law, but I have to do it every year because it is part of the appropriations process. So every year I do that. I've been doing that for really the last 15 years, and it's either been by vote on the floor. In recent years, I've gotten both when I was in the minority and in the majority, I've been able to get that into the actual law itself. So that means that any unspent funds go to deficit reduction. Before that, they went to a special slush fund that the Speaker of the House, that time was Tom Foley, kept. But since, in the last 15 years, this has gone to deficit reduction. My office has returned more than $1 million. And so it's about really trying to encourage that you don't spend every cent that you have, but that if you don't spend it, that it goes to reduce the deficit.
Okay. Staying on some of the national issues, and then I'll come back to a couple of Michigan ones. The 11th Circuit Court ruled that the individual mandate on health care or Obamacare, whatever you choose to call it, is unconstitutional. Yet the president, obviously, much like his ban on drilling in the Gulf of Mexico after the oil spill, seems to, I guess, still move ahead and still push ahead with those issues. What do you think about that?
Well, I do think there are serious constitutional questions about whether the government can force you to buy a product. And this is what the court case is about. Now that the 11th Circuit has ruled, it's critical that the Supreme Court rule next summer, before the elections, on the issue of whether the health care bill that the pretty much the Democrats passed is one that is constitutional. And I think this just highlights how important it is to get the final word from the Supreme Court on that issue.
Okay. Can we touch on Libya and Syria a little bit? The president has called on those countries' leaders, Gaddafi and al-Assad, to step down, yet they seem to be taking their time, almost defying the president, and much like Mubarak did in Egypt. Do you think the message isn't carrying the same weight it used to? Or do we need other leaders throughout the world to call on them to step down as well?
Well, I think it was Hillary Clinton that called for the Syrian president to step down. I'm not sure I ever have heard the president say that. Now, obviously, she's speaking on behalf of the administration. But in terms of Libya, there's obviously a war going on, and NATO is very involved in the removal of Gaddafi there. And I think it appears from the news I'm seeing that it's only a matter of time that they've at least taken over the compound where he was based, and it's unclear where he is right now. Syria is another issue that is not a NATO-backed area, and I think that's going to take, obviously both I think are going to take much more time, and frankly, I think the issues involving both of those countries in many cases will just have begun when those leaders leave. For example, in Libya's case, there's no rule of law, there's no police force, it's all based on the dictatorship of Gaddafi. So they're going to have to go way back to the beginning, and it is a tribal society there, and I think there are going to be a lot of difficulties moving forward.
Okay. This is going to be a tough question. There's been an uproar over the president and the length of time he's been in vacation. Also, the length of time, unfortunately, you who serve in Congress are on recess, especially with some of the problems that the U.S. is facing right now and the severity of those issues. What's your stance on the length of time you guys take recess, and are you going to be meeting with more constituents like in a town hall format? Well,
not being in Washington doesn't mean you're not working in terms of Congress, because we have constituents we need to engage with and visit with. And so while I'm here, I'm also meeting with people and going around the district, and I'm doing my best to get good information from what they have to say. I don't have any, quote, town hall meetings planned, because many of those are then misdirected by groups that simply come in and try to take over them. So what I'm going to do is continue to have meetings and be available, and that's what I think is the best approach. The president's really going to have to answer for his own actions in terms of what he does. I think the location more than the time off is, I think, what's bothering a lot of people. It's one of the wealthiest, most liberal parts of the country. It doesn't really show much balance there, but I'll let him answer for that.
Okay. I was also leading into a second part of that question. Some representatives are supposedly charging for town halls and to get into those town halls. Rep. Paul Ryan, I believe.
I've not heard of that.
Okay.
One of the things too is, unlike the president, we live in our districts. I live in Michigan. My children go to the Midland Public Schools. So One of the reasons I come back to Michigan is not because I'm not working, but because I live here, and I think I am a better representative because I do live here. And so I think, just because I or others are not in Washington, but I've not heard of people charging for town halls. I've not been at any events that have been charged, but I think, for example, some Chamber of Commerce events, if you're a speaker at some of their annual meetings, they do charge for those, but you're just a guest at another event. So I would guess that's probably what it is, because I've not heard of people charging for town halls. Okay.
Going back into two Michigan issues, and then one last question after that. Can you give an update on the Asian carp problem that it seems to be affecting Michigan? You and Senator Stabenow, sponsored legislation to combat this issue. Can you tell me what's going on there?
Well, I think certainly I think we both feel that there should be a hydrological separation of the Great Lakes and the Chicago River. That means that there would be more certainty that the Asian carp wouldn't get into the Great Lakes. We continue to find fish north of the barriers. The Army Corps has done some work in terms of strengthening those barriers, but not enough has been done. We're still waiting for their final study, and it's taking far too long. So we need to keep the pressure on to get those agencies, both Army Corps and EPA and Fish and Wildlife, to really make sure that we preserve and protect the Great Lakes.
Okay. As a resident of Michigan, there's a hot button topic here right now is the proposed bridge over the Detroit River, and obviously the governor's pushing for that, and he wants it to be publicly financed. Canada's saying they'll loan us $550 million to help with the construction. Where do you stand on the bridge issue? And do you think we even need it right now? I mean, they're talking about $3 billion to build it.
Well, that's really an issue that the state legislature is going to vote on, and I know they're deciding when to do that and what the votes will be. And I know the governor, as you mentioned, is supportive of it, but I haven't taken a position on that. It's not something I'm voting on.
Sure.
It's not a federal issue.
Right, I understand that. I just thought I'd ask anyhow. How about, for the last question, the race for the nomination for the 2012 Republican nomination? Do you have a candidate you're backing right now? And perhaps, what are your thoughts on fellow Congressman Thaddeus McCotter's campaign to date?
Well, there are 11 candidates so far for the Republican nomination, and I'm not sure we've heard from everybody. I have not endorsed a particular candidate yet. I'm still looking at the race, and I think there's plenty of time. But we have this opportunity to really kind of take a look at a wide variety of candidates in a broad field and see which candidate we think best suits the philosophies that each of us may have, and also I think could do the job and potentially win the office. Thad's a great guy, and he's, I know, working hard on it. He's at about 1% in terms of his name recognition, so he's not getting on the stage in any of the debates so far. That may come later, but this is what he wants to do. It's a free country, and I admire the fact that he's stepping up and trying to make a difference.
Okay. Any final thoughts you'd like to leave us with?
Just that I think it's so important that we focus on jobs and do everything we can to create jobs. I think fundamental tax reform, where we lower rates and broaden the base, after the '86 Act and the 2 years following, 6 million jobs were created in the U.S. I think we'll see economic growth and more jobs created if we can address the complexity and the uncertainty of our tax code. I also think we need to find new markets to sell our goods and services into. That's going to be an important part of growing. Most of the market is outside the United States, and we need to be participants in that.
Okay. I apologize. I'm going to be like Columbo here, Detective Columbo.
Yeah.
One last thing I forgot to ask. The 10th anniversure of the attacks on 9/11 are coming up. Where are you going to be? Give us some thoughts. And I'm not sure if you're aware of it or not. Big Rapids was one of 4 communities in the state of Michigan to receive a piece of the World Trade Center for a memorial. Just what your thoughts are for the 9/11 and the 10th anniversary. Well,
it's in many ways been a quick 10 years, but I think obviously you think about the people who lost their lives and their families, and then the many men and women who are serving in our United States military who are really trying to combat Islamic extremism around the world, and their dedication and their service to keeping us safe, and the fact that we have been safe for the most part from external Islamic terrorism for at least a decade. And that is something that I think hits all of us very deeply, and I think it's an opportunity, obviously, to remember, but also to think about the future and how we need to continue to protect the United States, and our military is a very big part of that, and be thankful for them.
Will you be attending any of the memorials? Or?
I'm not sure what all is in place there. My schedule isn't set yet for that day.
Gotcha. Okay. Thanks, Congressman.
Okay.
We appreciate your time, and anytime we can do this again, that'd be great.
Oh, sure. Thanks.